I pre-ordered the iPhone 17 on the day it was announced, which was around 9 months ago, and I've now been using it as my main phone every day for the last 4 months. In this video, we're going to go in depth on the things I like about this phone, the things that I think could be improved, and whether ultimately you should consider buying it. Let's start with design and durability. The design of the 17 hasn't substantially changed from the iPhone 16, but that's no bad thing. I really like the design here, and it honestly feels premium in every way. I opted for the mist blue version, and I love how this colour looks on the frosted glass back, and how the colour continues into the brushed aluminium side rails. I also love how the materials are all given a matte finish rather than being glossy. From a practicality standpoint, this means that you can confidently run this phone without a case, without having to worry about fingerprints showing on the body of the phone. Glossy finishes on phones are a definite pet peeve of mine, as it really discourages me from wanting to take the phone out of the case. While the mist blue is my favourite colour, the 17 also comes in 4 other colours: lavender, sage, white and black, so there's a good chance you'll find a colour that you like. The matte finish and beveled sides of the phone, along with the relatively lightweight 177-gram body, also make it really nice to hold. Moving around the front of the phone, Apple have trimmed down the bezels from the iPhone 16's 6.1-inch screen to give the iPhone 17 a 6.3-inch screen. This results in a really clean looking front of the phone, which has tiny bezels and widely rounded corners, which now matches the Pro model and really adds to the premium feel. However, I wouldn't have minded if they've simply trimmed down the bezel but kept the 6.1-inch screen, giving us a smaller body, as I'm a sucker for a compact phone. In terms of durability, the phone has held up extremely well. I've been using Dbrand's grip case on the phone, which has protected the phone really well, and provides full MagSafe support, so I'd definitely recommend it if you're looking for a solid case for the 17. I've left a link down below if you want to pick one up. However, what's most impressed me about the durability is the Ceramic Shield 2 glass that's covering the display. The display glass is in literally perfect condition, despite me not using a screen protector or babying this phone in any way. I've even dropped it multiple times onto hard surfaces in such a way that I was half expecting the phone to be completely smashed, but to my surprise, every time I picked it up, it was completely fine. Admittedly, the phone has been in the Dbrand case the entire time I've been using it, but it's still extremely impressive. What's even more impressive is I can't see a single micro scratch on the screen, which I tend to have on every other phone I've used after this amount of time. Ultimately, I'd be happy saying that you don't really need a screen protector for the 17, unless you're the type of person who really doesn't take care of your phone and throws it around recklessly. I think Apple have set a new benchmark for screen durability, which other manufacturers should be striving to achieve too. Moving on to the actual display itself, and again I've been very impressed. Up until this point, the base iPhone has been stuck with a 60Hz display, despite 120Hz displays being commonplace for years now in Android phones that are way cheaper. Apple have finally upgraded their base iPhone to include their ProMotion 120Hz display, and it's been a long time coming. It's definitely a beautiful display though. Swiping around iOS and various apps is now super smooth. Plus the screen gets really bright with a peak outdoor auto brightness of 3000 nits with a typical max brightness of 1000 nits, which makes content on the screen easily viewable in pretty much any lighting conditions. The screen also dynamically switches between 1Hz and 120Hz depending on the frame rates of the content that you're watching on the screen, which certainly helps with battery life over the course of a day. Another thing that's particularly noticeable is the resolution of the display, which is 460 pixels per inch. In real use, this is noticeably sharper than on the 1080p displays of similarly sized rivals such as the Samsung Galaxy S26 and the Pixel 10, which have a substantially lower pixel density of 411 and 422 pixels per inch respectively. Next, let's talk charging, and wired charging via the USB-C port can get you around 50% of charge in around 20 minutes, and in my testing I was able to achieve just over 37 watts of maximum charging speed, but this was for a relatively short time, and it tended to average out around 26 to 27 watts. This feels more than fast enough for the majority of situations that I found myself in, and has never felt too slow to the point where I was left with too little charge before going out somewhere. While this doesn't get close to the charging speeds that you can get from phones from the Chinese brands, which can hit upwards of 100 watts, this is a noticeable upgrade over even the iPhone 16, which could only charge up 50% in 30 minutes. We also obviously have MagSafe, which gives us up to 25 watts wireless magnetic charging, as well as access to the entire market of MagSafe accessories, which is great. And speaking of accessories, you're going to need somewhere to store them when you travel. That's where the sponsor of this video, tomtoc, comes in with their Aviator T35 sling bag and Light T12 tech pouch. I have a couple of issues when I'm on the move that these solve. Firstly, sometimes I don't want to take a large bag out for the day, but I don't have enough pocket space for my essentials. The Aviator T35 gives me a lightweight, low-profile solution that I can sling across my chest. It's made of premium waterproof X-Pack fabric with sturdy Duraflex metallic buckles, and its multi-compartment layout fits and organizes my iPhone 17 and accessories easily. I can wear it on my back or slide it round to the front for maximum security in crowded areas. Plus, it's covered with RFID blocking material to protect my cards. My other issue is storing tech accessories where I can find them easily, as they usually just end up stuffed wherever I can fit them in my camera bag. The super portable Light T12 solves this, letting me organize all my important gear in one place in my backpack using its smart multi-pocket layout. It's made from eco-friendly recycled material, and once I get to where I'm going, it stands up on a flat surface for instant easy access to everything inside. Both products have really great build quality, feel built to last, and come in a variety of sizes and colors to fit your style. For the Prime Day sales, TomToc is offering up to 25% off plus extra savings with a promo code. I've left the code and links to both products in the description below for you to check out. While you're down there, let me know in the comments, how do you guys usually organize your gear when you're traveling? A huge thanks to TomToc for supporting this video. So keeping all your charging accessories organized in a pouch is great, but the real question is, how often are you actually going to need to reach for them? Well, battery life has been surprisingly solid on the 17, considering it still has one of the smallest batteries on the market at 3,692 mAh, which is about a 3.7% increase over the iPhone 16's battery. Over the 68 days that I actually noted down my battery performance, I averaged 4.5 hours of screen on time with about 37% battery remaining at the end of what was usually a 15-hour day. You can definitely drain this battery a lot faster if you do intensive tasks like gaming. I was rarely needing to charge the phone up before the end of the day, apart from when I was traveling for about 12 plus hours on my way to France and using my phone exclusively on mobile data for watching and listening to content. My main uses of the phone are messaging on WhatsApp, listening to Spotify, watching YouTube, scrolling social media like Reddit, and using the odd bit of Google Maps on my commute. If you use the phone for mixed use like this and fully drained the battery, then I expect you'd achieve about 7 to 7.5 hours of screen on time, which is more than enough for most people. Moving to the bottom of the phone, and the iPhone 17 has really solid stereo speakers. The audio quality is really good for listening to the odd podcast or music when you're doing things around the house. And in my experience, the speakers can get to a good volume without sacrificing clarity, which is all I really want from my phone's speakers. Next, we have connectivity, where the iPhone 17 largely performed really well. The Qualcomm modem has been very reliable, consistently providing me with a solid 4G or 5G connection. The 17 also supports Wi-Fi 7, and the Wi-Fi connection on this phone has been very consistent for me, allowing me to stay connected in certain places that were previously dead spots for other Android phones that I've tested recently. I would say that the main pain point in terms of connectivity is the USB 2.0 USB-C port on the bottom of the phone. I know the faster USB 3.2 port is a feature that Apple reserves for their Pro iPhones, but pretty much every one of the similarly priced competition uses USB 3.2 speeds, and there are Android phones at much cheaper prices that also support this, such as the Google Pixel 10a. For the majority of users of this phone, this spec won't matter. However, if you're planning on creating content with your iPhone, then I found that any files that are above about 2 GB in size can often fail when transferring via AirDrop. This is where a much faster USB port would be extremely helpful. This was a problem I specifically experienced when I was using the iPhone 17 to shoot shots and then transfer them to my Mac for my recent DJI Osmo Pocket 4 video. Moving on to performance, and the A19 chip in this phone tied in with Apple's hardware and software optimization results in a generally really smooth experience. The 8GB of RAM in this phone also feels like more than enough to run iOS smoothly for years to come, which just demonstrates how efficient iOS is with its RAM compared to Android competitors. I've not experienced any slowdowns or stutters at any point while using the 17. And if you're someone who likes to push your phone harder than the everyday tasks, the iPhone 17 can definitely keep up. This isn't a phone designed for gaming, but the 5-core GPU in the A19 chip is certainly powerful enough to consistently make use of all the display's 120Hz, even in heavy games like Delta Force, where it can push 120 frames per second with decent graphics settings with no real issues. The phone does get fairly hot when you're pushing the GPU like this though, and after about 20 minutes, it can be quite warm to the point where it starts to get a wee bit uncomfortable to hold. But you could always just lower the graphics settings or the frame rate if you want to avoid that. It also chews through battery a lot quicker when you do this. After an hour of playing Delta Force at 120 frames per second at the maximum settings that the game allowed, it used 27% of the 17's battery. Based on this, you'd likely get about 3.5 hours of gameplay if you used the full battery, which is not bad to be honest. But this is an extreme example, and if you're playing less intensive games, then this phone doesn't break a sweat. But while the chip and RAM run the software smoothly, unfortunately it's not all been smooth, and I've definitely encountered some negatives in my experience with the 17. I mentioned this in my iPhone 16e review, but I still find the typing and general keyboard experience on iOS quite frustrating. I find myself making far more mistakes than on Android, which I think is down to the subpar autocorrect on the iOS keyboard. And another issue I kept on having with the iPhone 17 was accidental triggers of different inputs, especially when picking up the phone due to the placement of the buttons. It's actually been ridiculous how many screenshots I've accidentally taken by going to pick up the phone and accidentally clicking the power button and the volume up button. And it isn't just a me problem. My wife has also picked up the iPhone 17 and triggered a screenshot accidentally. This isn't as easy to trigger on most Android phones as the button layout is different, which means you have to be very intentional about when you want to take a screenshot, which I think makes a lot more sense. I've also quite frequently found that I've accidentally triggered visual intelligence to open up using the long press of the camera control button. However, there's an accessibility setting that you can change so that it requires a more firm push on the button to trigger this feature. Changing that setting has made a big difference in how often this triggers. It's not all negative though. One of my new favourite features is shortcuts. I know it's not a new feature by any stretch of the imagination, but I only really discovered it on the iPhone 17, and it's a really powerful app. For anyone unfamiliar, the Shortcuts app basically allows you to create workflows of different actions that you can trigger to complete with a single prompt. For example, we have a log of my newborn baby's eating habits, which we have to update frequently throughout the day. I created a simple shortcut that allows me to tap one icon on the homepage that takes me straight into that spreadsheet, rather than me having to go and find it within Google Drive every single time I want to update it. This is a super simple shortcut, but it's amazingly helpful when you're trying to update this at 2 AM and half asleep. In reality, if you're a proper power user, you can do some crazy complex things with shortcuts that could save you a lot of time. I think the most similar comparison to this on Android is probably the Routines Plus feature within Good Lock on Samsung phones, but it's nice to have a native iOS app that supports this. Next, let's talk cameras. There are some nice upgrades this year compared to the iPhone 16. While the 17 has the same 48 megapixel wide camera, it gets an upgraded 48 megapixel ultra wide, plus a brand new 24 megapixel front facing camera with a square sensor, which is a major upgrade. From a photography perspective, the wide camera produces nice detailed images consistently in both good lighting and low light, and I've felt like I've been able to rely on this sensor to get good results consistently. The ultrawide is a bit more mixed, but in no way bad. I found that it produces good results in good lighting, but it does have quite a bit of distortion in the corners, which is honestly to be expected from most ultrawides on smartphones. The photos from the ultrawide also can get fairly muddy in low light due to its smaller sensor compared to the wide camera. But I've been most impressed with the selfie camera, as it's just such a versatile and practical camera. The square sensor gives you the ability to take 18 megapixel photos or 4K video in either portrait or landscape orientation, regardless of how you're holding the phone. I found that it's generally easier to hold the phone in portrait orientation, but to use the landscape photo option, especially when you have a lot of people that you're trying to get into the photo. It honestly makes group selfies effortless. Plus, I've been really impressed with the quality of the photos from the sensor. The only time it struggles is in particularly dark lighting situations, but apart from that, it's wide enough for most situations and generally looks better than most selfie cameras on other phones I've used. I assume Apple has heavily patented this technology because I thought we would have seen it in more competitors' phones by now. It's easily one of my favourite features about this phone, and I'm really glad that Apple didn't limit this to the Pro iPhones. From a video perspective, I've also been thoroughly impressed with the 17. Particularly with the quality of the wide camera. I recently released a video on a DJI Osmo Pocket 4, and there were multiple point of view shots within that video that were shot on the iPhone 17. A lot of the B-roll was shot in fairly low light conditions, but the wide camera didn't break a sweat, and the quality of the 4K video out of it is just excellent. The footage actually didn't look out of place next to my dedicated mirrorless cameras. And because the wide camera has sensor shift stabilization, the stabilization is pretty good, even in low light conditions. The ultra-wide camera is definitely noticeably weaker, being significantly worse in low light, and being let down by that smaller sensor and the lack of physical stabilization, which often results in some pretty obvious digital stabilization jitters. But in good lighting conditions, it's definitely good enough for vlogging or capturing memories of your family or pets. Again, the front-facing camera really surprised me with the video quality, which in my opinion is good enough for filming yourself for a YouTube video. Most other phone selfie cameras that I've used just don't look good enough for big screen content, which ultimately makes the process of filming more difficult because you have to use the rear cameras and you can't see yourself for framing. The iPhone 17's front-facing camera produces excellent quality 4K video, and it just doesn't look like a selfie camera. However, once again, it's reliant on digital stabilization, which is excellent in good lighting conditions, but makes the image look a little bit jittery in low light scenarios. Finally, let's talk price and value. Usually iPhones are not the first product I think of next to the word value. However, this year Apple makes a pretty compelling argument for the iPhone to come under that description. Firstly, there have been some clear, tangible upgrades from the iPhone 16, such as the 120Hz display, upgraded ultra-wide and front-facing cameras, and upgraded A19 chip, which I think will allow the phone to stay fast and usable for 6 to 7 years for the average user. But the most significant marker of value this year is that Apple have maintained the same £799 or $799 price point as the iPhone 16, while doubling the base storage to 256GB. This makes the iPhone a great value against similarly priced competitors such as the Google Pixel 10 and Samsung Galaxy S26, where the former still only offers 128GB base storage and the latter offers 256GB base, but at the increased price of $899. I think Apple have made a decision that supports consumers in this case, and they have to get credit for that. Of course, in reality, the Pixel 10 can often be found for much less than its RRP during many sales throughout the year. In contrast, the iPhone barely ever goes on sale, and when it does, it's usually only about $50 maximum off the starting price. So we've got to keep that in mind when we're comparing these phones. But I still think the iPhone is genuinely good value this year. It actually feels like it has the specs that I would expect from an Air tier product from Apple. The specs feel like they sit somewhere between what the base would have and what the Pros have, which is a really good balance. I'd personally say that this phone is possibly even worth the upgrade from the iPhone 16 if you already own one, as you're getting some meaningful upgrades here. Mainly the high refresh rate screen and the class-leading front-facing camera. I think if you've been considering switching from Android or waiting to upgrade from an even older iPhone, then the 17 is the perfect device to pull the trigger on, as it feels like a really complete phone for the price. I also reckon that if you don't need the upgraded cameras of the Pro iPhones, then it's a bit of a no-brainer now to just go for the base 17, as the experience between this and the Pro phones now basically comes down to the camera differences for most people. But what do you think of the 17? Please let me know down in the comments below. And if you're interested in picking up a 17 for yourself, then I've left the link down there too. But if you want to see my comparison between the iPhone 17 and the iPhone Air, then you can click on the video on screen right here. Cheers!